Welcome, everybody, to the second edition of the MNIDC 2025 workshop series. Today, we will have a session conducted by Rashrvin Pillay. Rashrvin is among one of the most celebrated and achieved debaters in the Malaysian circuit in recent history. To give an idea of his achievements, recently he was the quarterfinalist of Guangzhou UADC 2025, getting the 7th Best Speaker award. In 2024, he broke at all three Asian majors, getting a semifinals at ABP 2024, and Octofinals in Australs 2024, also getting 7th Best ESL Speaker, and also breaking at that year's UADC. In terms of his national achievements, he was the Open Champion of MNUDC 2023 and has broken at multiple nationals, including a semi-final at MNIDC 2023. Amongst that, he is also very well accomplished in the judging scene. He has had 3 overall Best Judge awards at Santa Mesa Open 2023, Calcutta Open 2024, and Intertext Pro-Ams 2024. Rashrvin's CAP achievements are also very well heavy. He recently CA'd the large Calcutta Open 2025 amongst a huge multitude of Intertext events, Indo-Pacific pre-ABP as well, amongst other things that if I list out would be very, very huge. To cap it all off, Rashrvin is also the current council chair of the Malaysian National Debating Council, and through his leadership has been able to push a multitude of necessary services and stuff for the Malaysian circuit, including this very workshop series and further advancements for the Malaysian National Circuit. Rashrvin is also a very well accomplished, flexible speaker. I would personally say one of his greatest skills that I'm scared of if I'm ever debating against him is his rebuttal, which is exactly what he will present to you all today. Therefore, at the end of this, I'm very, very happy to allow and ask Rashrvin to take it away.
Thank you very much, Imran. That's very illustrious of you. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Rashrvin. So the purpose of today's workshop is not to turn you all into masters of rebuttal. Rather, it's more about helping you to understand the fundamentals of rebuttal. So in this lesson, in this journey together, I only have two rules. The first rule is if you don't understand something, you can always use the raise hand feature. You can personally message me. I can explain it to you in an easier manner that you can digest it better. So don't feel shy to ask question. If at any point in time I use certain terms that are maybe complex or hard to understand. The second is this series is particularly created in a very novice friendly manner. So no difficult motions, no world's motion. I've just taken all the WSDC slides to make it very, very easy for you all. Okay, this is an interactive lesson. Feel free to unmute yourself, put in the mic. The session is built in a way that expects your engagement. So let's have a good time learning together for the next 1.5 hours. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about with all of you is how do you all envision rebuttal? Like, what is rebuttal for each and every one of you? You can either put it in chat, you can open your mind, you can talk about it. What is rebuttal to you? If I were to ask, describe rebuttal, how would you do it? Oh, a response to a claim of argument. Okay, that's good. Rage bait. Response argument, that's fair. Dismantling opponent's case, it's very good. Okay, thanks to all those who have given me an answer. All of you are pretty much right, except the rage bait. Maybe it does works in certain circumstance, but we're going to see beyond rage baiting your opponent in today's lesson. So, what is a rebuttal? Definition wise, a rebuttal is a form of response to someone's counterclaim about an original argument. Rebuttal is when you challenge, criticize, or find fault with your opponent's argument with a reason. The specific emphasis I want all of you to direct yourself towards is with reason. Why? Common mistake that people do when giving rebuttal is you tend to ask question, you tend to give out a statement, but you don't explain why. For example, in terms of determining who are the vulnerable actors, maybe this house supports slow parenting, and you need to determine who is a more important stakeholder. Probably Gov says, slow parenting is good for the parents, they have more time, they can chill a bit. Op might say, no, children are the more vulnerable actors, they need constant attention from the parents, whatnot. How do you decide who is more important? So you can say, what about the child? The child is young, but that is insufficient form of a response to show why does child being young automatically mean they're important. So here's where reasoning plays an important role to fill in that gap for you. Okay, when do you do rebuttal? If you are really new and if you are learning to start doing rebuttals, beginning of the speech is where you put them. At the top, you can say I have two things to respond. Government said this, three reasons. Opposition said this, two reasons. Okay. Top of your speech, you position those rebuttals before entering into your arguments. Maybe you are someone who is already within the debating circuit for some time. You know how to put together with your positive material, then you can integrate them together. This might be tricky because you may fall into the risk of overlapping claims, or maybe sometimes spotlighting your rebuttals and not your positive material. So you need to really know how to do it. Then you can do integrated integration method. Third, this is less recommended, but sometimes it's very crucial. End of your own arguments. When do you position this? Usually, when you don't want to knife fight your opponent. Knife fight means they say A, you say A1. They say B, you say B1. When you don't want to knife fight many different things, you focus on the positive material. You try to weigh against all their arguments within your arguments. So you build all of that, and then at the end, you can just put a small remark kind of thing. Actually, Op had these two things. Here's why a positive material beats that as well. So instead of rebutting and then building your material, you build all the material, and then at the end, you explain to the judge, here's why we weigh against them. So, Rashwin, which is the best one? It's really up to your own comfort, but the easiest way to start off is beginning of your speech. Okay, how do you do rebuttals? Okay, this is a 6 question template that I've learn, seen through different debating videos and put together. This is something you might want to take photo of. So what I tell my younger students is you write all this down, you laminate, you keep at the top of your table when debating. So whenever you hear something, someone saying something or giving a form of argument, you ask yourself all these questions. Okay. I'll walk us through individually what each of them mean. But yeah, it's really helpful to take a screenshot, a photo of this. It just makes the process of rebutting much more easier. So, what are these 6 questions? First one is the statement true? Second one, can the benefit be co-opted? Third one, can the harm be washed? Fourth one, can the harm be mitigated? Fifth one is the benefit or harm likely to manifest? And sixth is, even if it's true, why your claim outweighs. So these are the 6 questions you always ask when you want to offer a rebuttal. First one is quite straightforward and intuitive, whether a statement is true or false. If I say Malaysia's Independence Day is 14 August 1957, all of you would say it's false because it's factually incorrect. The second one, can the benefit be co-opted? Co-opted literally means the other team possesses a set of benefit. You are explaining to the judge, we also can have that benefit. What does it look like? Maybe in a world that says this house regrets the rise of hustle culture, and Gav says it's the constant competition among people that makes them want to feel less good, less happy, and whatnot. But in opposition, you can also say because people don't do anything, they don't feel validated. That's why they feel such way. Okay. So 2 and 3 is quite the same. It's pretty much they have, we have, but 2 is more on the benefit side, 3 is on the harm side. Wash pretty much means making it symmetric. There's no unique value or harm from the other team. It's symmetrical under both sides. Fourth, this is a more common technique all of you probably know. Can the harm be mitigated? What is mitigated? The harm exists, but you are reducing the visceralness. So let's say the scale of harm is 5, and then you give 3 response, 1, 2, 3. Now the scale of harm is only 2 because you mitigate large extent whether the harm could exist or not. Fifth is the benefit or harm likely to manifest. Classic weighing mechanism. So the motion is this house regrets the rise of tiger parenting. And then Gav says it's bad because students tend to end their life, choose wrong decisions because they're under immense pressure. So in these instances, you'd probably say, yeah, maybe it would happen, but it's very less likely compared towards students who discipline themselves, who work hard, have a proper regime, spend more time in the education, be successful. So on scale, the number of students who get disciplined or benefit from your model of benefit is much more higher compared towards the number of people who choose to end their life. So this is what we call utilitarian metric on a scale number wise, which one is more. The last thing then is, even if it is true, why your claim outweighs. This is something a lot of new debaters tend not to do, which is taking your opponents at the best case. I'll explain this particular part at the later much more further. So how do you use this template? The template is very simple. You just answer yes or no. Every time you receive an argument, the first question you ask is the statement true? If the statement is not true, you give reason why that is not true. Assuming the answer is yes, the statement is true, you go to the next question. Can the benefit be co-opted? If the answer is yes, you explain why you can co-opt. If the answer is no, you go to the next question. Can the harm be washed? If the answer is no, you go to the next question. Can the harm be mitigated? If the answer is yes, give your mitigations. If let's say you don't know how to mitigate or you can't mitigate, then you go to number 5. Is the benefit or harm likely to manifest? If the answer is if it's a benefit, if it's a harm and likely to manifest, you do the even if. So this is the order in which you ask your question. Why are they arranged in this order? So why isn't mitigation first compared towards statement being true? It is easier for you to prove to someone why an argument is factually not true rather than you attempting to mitigate that harm. So that's why you always strategically choose the rebuttal that is more likely to convince the judge with lesser number of words. So that's how this order works. From the easiest form of response that is most convincing to the most difficult form of response, which is hard, but when done, is likely going to tip the favor in your scale. Does anyone have any question on this part? Okay, none. I'm assuming all good. Let's go to the next one. Oops, too far. Okay, let's start by talking about evaluating the truth of the argument. This is the first question. A common mistake that teams or debaters tend to do is they skip the rational thought process of analyzing whether an argument made by the opposing team is true or not. Instead, what they do, they jump straight into the rebuttal and they want to disprove it. Remember, it is easier to refute a false argument rather than trying to take it down. So let's test how sharp are all of you in this instance. So here's an example, and the motion is this house would ban sports betting. Info slide reads, sports betting is a common form of gambling where people bet money on the outcome of sports event, i.e. horse racing, boxing matches, FIFA World Cup. This includes, but is not limited to, wagering on who would win or lose a match, the margin of victory, the statistical performance of a single player on a team, etc. Opposition makes an argument. Sports betting is illegal and unregulated. A lot of poor people lose money due to this. Now, there's obviously many types of responses you can give to this argument, but based on what we have learned, which is asking yourself whether it's true or false, which part of this sentence or statement would you likely offer your rebuttal to and why?
Can you repeat a question?
Okay, based on what we have learned, which is asking ourselves whether it's true or not, which part of opposition's argument is not true? Okay, Sui says sports betting isn't illegal. Perhaps the illegal, unregulated part. Poor people, because it's less likely for them to put money on it. Okay, I don't think there's any more answer coming. Okay, first sentence. First motion is to assume betting is legal at the moment. Okay, I think most of you have gotten the answer right. So very good. The answer that you all are given pretty much is correct. So a better form of rebuttal is that states already permit sports betting, which means they have strong regulation put in place to control the betting environment. This includes, but is not limited to, financial authorities and online regulators that dictates the term and condition before engaging in betting. So look at here. Opposition gives you two statements. Poor people lose money. Sports betting is illegal and unregulated. If you get into the fight of, but poor people don't lose money where they got money and all, obviously Ob will push back and say, but that's where large corporations exploit the desire for people to get rich and make them trapped in a loophole by offering them debt scheme and whatnot. So you prolong the clash. It doesn't seem like a win in your favor. But if you're able to disprove why in status quo betting is legal, like what you do here, you first tell it's not true, it's legal, and then you give a reason. The reason is because there are online regulators that have terms and condition. So this is the most important part. Okay, if something is not true, it's easier for you to disprove to the judge why it's not true, and always remember to give a reason. Don't just say that's not true, that's not how people behave, and then move on. That if you do that, you're just casting a doubt to the judge, but you're not essentially proving anything. So let's try another example. Okay, I'll let you all try this on your own. In low income communities, this house believes that charity should prioritize educational support for the most talented as opposed to equally distributing resources to all. Opposition here makes an argument that states have a principal obligation to help everyone as a part of social contract. So who here can find the mistake? Okay, what is the mistake here? Okay, motion isn't talking about gov role in society. There's no necessity for state to abide by social contract. Charities has no social contract. Okay, yes, all of you got it. Correct. States have obligation to take initiative. Yes, correct. Okay, that is the part where it is not true. You see, teams can be very cheeky. Principal obligation, help everyone as a part of social contract. All the statements given by opposition here is true. But is that a burden that they have to take in the debate? Obviously not. And why? Because the motion specifically says charities. Charities owe no obligation, and charities don't have a fixed type of contract with the people. That's why you have different type of charities that prioritize different needs in the society. So the rebuttal is simple. This debate is about whether charities should prioritize one group over the other. Therefore, there is no unique obligation of the state to cater to everyone. Opposition's argument holds no value in the debate. This rebuttal, in terms of word economy, saves you a lot more time rather than you telling why social contract and principal obligation is not the right metric to decide how to have. So don't jump into the rabbit hole and trap yourself into fighting clashes that you don't have to fight. Okay, if you can catch these easy things which are not true and just clarify with the judge why they're not part of the debate, you save so much of the time. So the ratio looks like maybe opposition takes 3 to 4 minutes to build this whole case and say why state principal argument really important. You can just disprove the whole thing in 30 seconds. So you got more time to build positive material, and you're now putting opposition on the back foot. They have more things to respond to you rather than you responding and trying to disprove what they say. So, the important takeaway for the first part is always ask yourself whether an argument is true to begin with. If it doesn't make sense or is not true in way of operation, immediately flag it to the judge, and most importantly, substantiate why the claim is not true and cannot be credited. You cannot just ask questions and this assume the judge will understand. Give reasons why the judge should not credit them. Okay, let's look at the second part, co-opting benefits strategically. Okay, wait, did anyone have any questions for this first part? I'm assuming all is good. Okay, let's go to the second part. Co-opting benefits strategically. Okay. A common mistake that teams tend to do is they will try to disprove a certain benefit when they can easily co-opt the benefit without the need of having to do rebuttals or weighing as to why your materials matter more in the debate. So if the benefits are similar, therefore it's better to just try and prove why you can attain the same benefits rather than telling this one incorrect, that one incorrect. It's just strategically wiser to do this. So let's look at an example. This house opposes further development of artificial intelligence. Very easy, straightforward debate. Gov makes an argument. AI is developing faster than the existing legal mechanism and safeguard. We need to stop it until we can properly know how to manage the use of AI. So, how would you think you can co-opt this benefit coming from AI? You can also learn how to manage its usage while developing AI. Okay. Okay, what about the others? How would you co-opt this benefit? We allow it to develop but not to release it to public until the legal mechanism is set. So at least development still happens. Okay, fair enough. There is never a right time to know when to fully use AI. Fair enough, fair enough. Okay, you can still develop it, but just regulate the development to a manageable pace. Okay, so in this Q&A session, there's a diverse term of answers. Um, Most of them are somewhat hitting the mark, but it just makes it tricky when you choose to pick and decide what you want to do. For example, when you say we will develop, but we won't release to the public. When you say we will develop, but we will also control the pace we are developing. So if you're really good and you're capable of mechanizing how both of them can exist, that's really good. But if you can't, and if you're still new, the general rule is always take the hard stance. Hard stance means if they are doing all these, how will we do everything and still continue them? Okay. So obviously the motion gives some vagueness on what is further development, and we don't know what op and gov and op had characterized in the debate. So a rebuttal here would be the development of AI allows us to better understand its use and progression. Only through further development we are able to plan, prepare, and mitigate any potential harm using regulatory mechanism. So I've kind of made it simple. What it essentially trying to tell is if you develop it in-house and you don't send out, you don't know how people use, you don't get any feedback from users, you can't identify patterns of usage. Only with this set of information you can identify and develop what are the necessary regulatory mechanisms. So you are literally telling the judge we are able to better do regulatory mechanisms by co-opting their own claims. So the metric that government established was it's not safe. We need to oppose the development because we don't know what are the type of risk it has. We need to place law in place. In opposition, your rebuttal is using their metric, which is having regulatory mechanism, but you're able to explain why you can even do it better under your side using the feedback loop, patterns, more usage, more data, and whatnot. Okay, so let's try another example. This house believes that schools should prioritize fostering students' internal motivation rather than emphasizing compliance to external motivation. Internal motivation can be unique to cater to different type of students, is a claim made by argument. Assuming you are in opposition, how would you co-opt this? Okay, yes, most students find a unique international motivation. Okay, fair enough. By complying external motivation, it can also help students be able to navigate towards their own interests. Why you seem to know all the answers, Asui? Have you had this lecture before? External motivations can also be unique and diverse. Yes, that's very good. Okay, I think pretty much everyone has. Okay, external motivation means more competition with others aiming the same, can drive their own goals and being competitive. Okay, good. Okay, so whatever I'm about to say next, you don't need to think you're right or wrong. because based on the answers I've seen in chat, all of you are able to show the usage on how to do the rebuttal. All of you are making the attempt to illustrate how can you co-opt it within your own argument. So that's good enough. Whatever the answer is next, you can still credit your own rebuttals that you have given in the chat as well. So what is a proposed form of answer? External forms of motivation still allow students to uniquely strategize and choose their own method to attain their desired success. In both worlds, students have the autonomy to plan their roadmap to victory. So if you notice, Gav's claim here is motivation can be unique to cater towards different type of students. The way I would co-op this is by telling motivation is just the same, internal and external. But students are able to use that motivation to strategize and choose how they want to succeed. So this response assume level of motivation is the same, but in both worlds, they still have autonomy to decide how am I going to use that energy. So if it's a student who is studying, maybe you want to study 8 hours a day, maybe you want to attend more tuitions. So in both worlds, students have autonomy to plan their roadmap to victory, and this is how you mitigate their benefit. This is a slightly advanced form of response, but all the answers you gave in the chat pretty much convinces me that you know how to co-op. So that's a good thing. Okay. So let's talk about washing the harm or benefit. Wait, before that, any question on the co-opting part? Okay, if none, I want to make one remark, which is there is a very thin line between co-opting the benefit and not taking a trade-off. So common mistake teams tend to do is we also have the benefit under our world. So let's say the motion says this house believes that states should prioritize investing in human capital over infrastructure development. Just because you see the word prioritize doesn't mean you can completely, use the response again and again. Oh, but it doesn't mean we will stop development in our world. Or it doesn't mean we will stop human capital under our world. The motion uses the word specifically prioritize, which means you have to defend choosing one over the other. Okay, so don't make the mistake of saying we have, they have. That isn't where you use this rebuttal. This rebuttal is uniquely for you to capture the benefit from other side. So let's look at the benefit or the harm. This is what we call washed. Okay, wash here refers to when a harm or benefit proposed by other team can be symmetrical, can be value neutral, or cancelled out by a proposition from your team. Proposition here refers to a suggestion and argument. A claim can be labeled as wash when there is no additional value that can be derived from the arguments. So what do they look like? So the motion reads, this house would not allow pharmaceutical companies to financially settle private lawsuits. Government makes an argument. Big pharma companies have an asymmetry of power when negotiating outside of the court to settle lawsuits. This is because they are able to hire expert lawyers from big law firms and strong arm the plaintiff into accepting low offer settlements. Who here can maybe tell how would you wash this? How would you probably explain to the judge the harm is symmetrical also on their on Gulf's world? Okay, how can we wash this argument coming from government? Okay, if the big pharma company hire good lawyers on both sides of the world, then they can just hire good lawyers to win in court easily. Yes, it happens anyway without a settlement. In fact, even worse due to lawyers' fee or plaintiff How is it played? This way, so they're allowed to settle off the court, you know, ball you so. Yes, okay, excellent, excellent. All of you are very good. Okay, so a proposed form of rebuttal would be the argument is a wash because the same big law firms would also represent the big pharma companies in the court. They have resource and capacity to produce evidence in their favor and delay the trial as long as possible to exhaust the plaintiff. So they still have some unfair advantage over their side. But the only difference I want to highlight is you don't want to stop at the same big law firms represent the big pharma. You want to explain why is that a wash. They also have the resource and capacity to produce evidence in their favor. Delay the trial as long as possible to exhaust the plaintiff. Okay. Remember to always adduce reasoning. The reasoning is what convinces you to the judges. Okay. Wash is very simple. It's just they claim we have a problem in our world. Here's why we're going to explain the problem also exists in their world. And the harm is value neutral. Okay. Again, these are all things that you should do before you go into mitigations. Because the moment you go into mitigation, you probably want to give several reasons and explain each of them. These model of responses are much more easier to be done. Okay, so you save much more time but having the same effect in convincing the judge why the other team's argument should be weighed lower. Okay, let's look into can the harm be mitigated. This is probably the most complex form of rebuttal, but at the same time, this is the one that most people try to use. What is mitigation? Mitigation refers to the action of reducing the degree or severity of an harm when it does occur. This can be done through mechanism or method that may be used to reduce the potential impacts of the other team. Assume they do happen. Always remember to complete mitigation by contrasting with why your outcome is better. So in this paragraph, there are three things that I want you to know. The first thing is this is a type of response that is more effective with more reasoning. And I'll explain much more later in that in the following slide. But the thing that I want you to take note of here is you cannot just say what they are, but you must explain what are each of them. So, for example, the motion is this house would ban smoking, and then other team says, but individual have autonomy. So what? It's their own body and own choice. So in Gulf, if you want to triumph against autonomy, you want to give several reasons to disprove why they don't have autonomy. First is the biological composition. Nicotine pretty much hijacks your dopamine system by causing you to be hooked upon it. Second is the marketing tactic of tobacco companies. Though it is not supposed to be done openly, it is still widely prevalent in social media and TikTok, where they seem to offer relief, happiness. Third is peer pressure. Why most people don't actively make the choice to smoke, rather they're oftentimes being pressured into trying or left in a fear of being left out or not being cool when they don't try it. So there's three reasons given to reduce the visceralness of autonomy. Why is it not taking out the claim? Because there are still likely going to be some instances where people voluntarily make the choice that they want to smoke, that they consent to the harm, because in their opinion, they feel smoking is good. So that is why we call this mitigation. That means you assume the benefit or harm that they claim is likely going to happen. You are just reducing the scale. So by giving the three reasons, you are telling the judge, not everyone is actually consenting to the harm, actively make a choice. But here are reasons that influence most number of people to make that decision that actively harms them. So on scale, you'd probably want to convince the judge more people make a non-consented benefit rather than opposition's claim of people having bodily autonomy. The last thing under this is contrasting why your side is better. You can't just give rebuttals and explain the other team is bad, wrong, not right, but you don't tell the judge why is your outcome better. Always remember. So if I already make those three responses, what does ban do? Ban eradicates all the potential of harm where people are not necessarily consenting towards it. So in a world where we cannot determine whether people do consent or do not consent, you're more likely able to protect the vulnerable individuals coerced into starting smoking. That's why ban is better. So I'm giving reasons, I'm mitigating the other team's harm, but I'm also making sure I'm telling the judge in our model, why are we better? Okay, please remember when you're giving a response, when you're attempting to mitigate, don't just say three response A, B, C, second rebuttal. You must always contrast at the end of the rebuttal. Why is your world better? Because if you don't do that, it's a deadlock. They say A, you say B, both of it can be true. The judge will never be able to decide who is more correct. And eventually, judge will credit on things like the most minor things, like style, maybe bias, you never know. And you don't want that to happen. You always want to make sure you win a clash rather than merely casting a shadow of doubt. Okay, let's look at an example of mitigating impacts of argument. This house would break energy conglomerates. What are energy conglomerates? They are corporations that consolidate a significant percentage of different energy sources, both renewable and non-renewable. These include, but are not limited to gasoline, electricity, solar energy, natural gas, nuclear energy. Examples include Total Energies and Repsol in Europe, Shell in Africa, Ecopetrol in Latin America. That was a long info slide. Okay, government makes an argument. Large energy conglomerates always collude, conspire among themselves to further drive up energy prices since they have a monopoly over the market. How would you mitigate this? So you can just come up with several reasons. Okay, you can give your answers in the chat, or you can even verbally unmute yourself and try. Transparent market where all trades are put out there allows a significant amount of dumping of energy futures and shares to be locked. Uh, okay, fair, I can get it. From Halim, good answer, sweet. We can set up policies to regulate the market instead of monopoly. Okay, good attempt, Sui. Policies to regulate. They cannot drive out prices because government regulation exists. Yes, good, okay. Agison's answer. Effects still happen either way. It's not just form of conglomerate, maybe a B2B structure. So you still profit, not just crazy as one. Okay. So I mean partnership between comps. Okay. Fair enough. Okay. I think that's pretty much now. I mean, if you all have more answers, feel free to send. I can always help you check. Okay. Let's see. So opposition's response would be collusion argument from Gov can be mitigated for several reasons. First, because antitrust law exists to to prevent companies and punish if they collude. And the second reason is because government can intervene and place a price cap. Why? So you need to explain. Okay, I'm just giving you the pointers. You need to explain why of them. A is because for corporations to engage in any lawful is very detrimental towards them. First, their PR takes a hit, which means stock prices go down. Second, if they are having going through long legal battle suits, it also affects their production, uh, ability to sell their products and whatnot. So there's an active negative detriment towards their profit, which they don't want. That's why they don't want to put themselves in instances where might bring them over to legal battles or lawsuits. Second is government can intervene and place price cap. Energy is like a consumer staple product at this point because from your daily life to a business, all of them need energy to operate. And government has an active stake to ensure energy is sustainably received by people. In European context, energy is more important because like during winter and all, if there isn't heater, people might freeze to death. They can't properly eat, drink, everything. So government has a responsibility over there. That's why government should likely intervene and place price cap. Okay? You don't only just give reasons, but you explain those reasons as well. Okay, this is the first part of the lecture in terms of mitigating. Next, we will look at weighing metric. But before that, are there any questions I can help you all to answer on what we have learned till so far? Okay, I'm assuming everyone is good. Let's just take a quick 5 minute break and then we will look into weighing metrics then. Okay, see you all in a bit. Okay, hello everyone, welcome back. Um, okay, let's play a small game before we all go into the lesson part. Okay, there's a question. How do we know if the mitigation we do is effective? Some mitigating and impact resolution might sound like unresponsive and strawman claims. Good question. It commonly happens. Two ways to overcome this. The first is to always ask yourself, what is the root cause of the other team's claim? So, for the example earlier, right? Incentive to collude, monopolize. Why do they want to collude? Why do they want to monopolize? They want to earn more money. So, how would you give a mitigation that is responsive? If they go into lawsuits, they lose money. If they are found guilty, their stock price drops, they lose money. Government always has overarching licensing power to control their price money. They can't make profit. So that's why every time they go overboard, the very reason why they do it, they can't be achieved. That is the first way you would know whether your mitigation attempt is working or not. Sometimes mitigation is hard to be effective because obviously the other team is also giving more counter reasons as to why their claim is true. So the best way to eventually break the deadlock is to add different types of rebuttal, maybe co-opting, maybe even if, and weighing against that. So the second method is more comprehensive. It leaves no room for doubt. So that is much more successful in often time overthrowing the other team's claim. Okay, game time. Okay, game time. Very easy game. I'm sure all of you have been to many debate competitions. All of you must have made many arguments. Uh, my question is, if you can go back in time and you can do one particular debate again, what would the motion be? Okay, you want to go back in time, and there's one motion you think like, after I leave the room, I got all the right arguments. What is the motion? Y'all can put in the chat. You see what are the motions? King Kongs. This also not start debating. Okay, this was with bad alcohol. Thanos will slump. Infinity War should be justified here. You go. This house supports. This house with AI therapy. This house regrets the concept of Harimau Mati meninggalkan Bulan. This house with bad debating. This house regrets the narrative of growing up. This house prefers a world without a shame. Okay, nice, nice. Oh, that's not. This house should kill baby Columbus. This house regrets this tournament. So many regrets. Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, debate is insane, man. Debate is insane. Debate, like, always after the round, I'll be like, yo, could have said this, could have said that, and everything will come after the round ended. Happens. It's just all a matter of training, learning, and moving forward. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for the quick, fun session. The others, some of you maybe have it, you didn't share, it's fine. Let's go into the second part of the lecture. I was thinking why this wasn't in the other slide, then I realized it's actually in a different slide. Okay, so let's look at likelihood analysis. So, some of you may know likelihood analysis to be a positive constructive mechanism, but a likelihood analysis can also be a form of rebuttal. What is the likelihood analysis? It is used to show to the judge how probable your harm or benefit is to occur. This is important because we value impacts that are more likely to occur because it multiplies your harms or benefit. So think about this. Let's say you go to a fun fair and you're Okay, sorry. I was using the hotspot and someone called. What's the last thing y'all heard, by the way? Anyone just tell me what's the last thing? Going to a fun fair. Okay, yes, y'all are going to fun fair. Okay, fun fair. And you have 10 ringgit in your hand. Okay. There are two particular game booth that attracts your attention. The first game booth is shooting the balloon, and the probability of you winning is 2 out of 10. The second game booth is throwing the hula hoop into a certain target. The probability of you winning there is 8 over 10. So, debate world assumes as an ordinary intelligent voter, shortly known as OIV, you will always make the choice that maximizes your outcome with a limited set of resources. So, same concept with likelihood analysis. Debate assumes you will always prioritize and value outcome that is more likely to happen. How do we do this, Rashwin? You do this by examining the stakeholders' incentive to behave in a particular manner. So, when something is likely, obviously the opposite must be also true, which is there are also reasons that inhibits people from behaving in certain manner. Like, for example, would you intentionally go and touch a hot boiling pan? You unlikely won't do it because your pain receptors would likely trigger pain. You don't want to experience pain. You don't want to leave a mark of burn on your skin. So, just as there are reasons why people would do something, there are always reasons why people or organizations would not do something. So, let's look at an example of this. So, tiger parenting, I've talked about this earlier. A common mistake, it's possible for some to unfortunately end their life in very rare and remote sentences, but judges will credit this argument less compared towards argument where more students are disciplined and more focused to study, and this is more likely to happen. Okay, let's look at another example. So obviously, when you want to give claim or truth towards your argument, you want to explain why this is likely. This house prefers a world with only one religion, and the argument that the team makes is reduce wars. So let's say you want to prove this argument. What would you do? You would explain why, on a principle level, these people are unlikely going to harm a member of their own religion. There's no clash in ideology to prove why one is better than the other, and they'll also have to collaborate with each other to maximize resources instead of competing. So the first one is a principal type of response and a construction. Second one is why there's no incentive to do so. The third one is why they have incentive to do so. So when you're able to cover things like this, principle or norm, incentive to do, incentive not to do, your claim becomes more comprehensive. So if you want to weigh against other team, why my argument is more likely than the other team, this is how you do it. Okay, the norm, the perception, the reception, incentive to do, incentive not to do, comprehensive. You cover all three grounds. So what I'm pretty much giving here is not the example, not the motion, not the argument, it's the template. How are you structuring those claims to begin with? Okay, let's look at weighing. What is weighing? Weighing is the most important mechanism in debate. It is done to show the judge why your contribution in debate has more value than your opponent's. Weighing is usually done at the conclusion of your argument. It can also be used as a method of rebuttal when your opponents have a well constructed argument. So here's where I think in debate there are like tiers. If some of you have heard always, judges would say, I thought this was an below average debate. I thought it was an average debate. I thought it was an above average debate. What do they actually mean by this? When they say it's a below average, the type of score that each speaker is getting is presumably less than 75, which means there are many arguments with unproven logical link. They are not well proven. And these instances, the judge probably decides who wins based on your analysis alone, not really complex weighing done by the judge, straightforward decision maybe for them. If it's an average debate, the score is somewhere between 74 to 76 for most of or almost all of the speakers. In this instance, the judge may use some incorporation of weighing in order to resolve deadlocks. Then above average debates is where teams score more than 77, 78, everyone or maybe some of the speakers. This is where most of the deadlocks probably requires the judge to use weighing to determine who wins. So why does a judge need to do weighing? So when you are debating, you must always remember, just as hard as you are trying to prove your argument to be true, correct, most impactful, your opponent is doing the same. And a judge is a person who has no affiliation with you, no affiliation with the other person. The judge is free from bias, hopefully, and the judge doesn't care about anything. All they care is the value of argument. So let's say you make the motion is this house would prioritize giving cash aid over rebuilding infrastructure in disaster prone areas. Government says cash aid is important because it's urgent. People want to buy their living necessary goods, all those things. Opposition says, but what's the point of cash if it's not sustainable? They buy it today, they use the money, they're done. Only rebuilding infrastructure helps them to continue the economic opportunity. So if they're fishermen, they can continue staying next to the sea. Now, when I'm telling you this, from a average person perspective, both of it is true. Money is important. They urgently need it so they don't fall into debt trap. They don't end up with not having resource to have a quality life. It's correct, it's valid. And the same goes for opposition. Sustainability is also an important factor, their livelihood and whatnot. But from your perspective, you'll always think, mine is important, mine is important. Okay. And in the debating journey, everyone goes through this. But weighing is what you can do additionally to convince the judge why does your argument matter more than the other team. So what are the metrics you can use to do weighing? Metrics are basically points, or in easy words you should suggest things that both teams agree should be adjudicated upon. Why is it important to choose metrics that teams agree upon? Relevance and teams agreeing is credited highly in most of the debate manual. So you can always look at UADC manual, WUDC manual, ABP manual. All of them prioritizes relevance and prioritizes agreement upon teams. Obviously, judge will prioritize claims or metrics that teams explicitly agree. Sometimes teams don't explicitly agree, they implicitly agree. Then judges prioritize that metric. Okay, now how do we use each of these metric? First, scale of impact. Very straightforward. How many people are impacted? How large is the magnitude? And that's how you use it. When do you do this? Utilitarian usages. So if in your world you are able to show more people are positively benefiting compared towards some people being negatively harmed under the other team's world, you can convince the judge that you win. Second one is urgency of execution. Does it have to be done immediately? Some implications oftentimes tend to be irreversible. For example, you all know Bukelele's method of eliminating crime in El Salvador. He used like real harm military intervention, arrested everyone, gave no respect to things like, okay, should I say this? This is recorded, right? Okay, they just use very harsh ways of catching criminals. That's the only thing they did, disregard everything I said. So a good Gov team's claim would say this is urgent to be done now, because if you don't stop growth and progression of criminal organization, it becomes much more harder to take them down later. Because when they become developed and experienced, they can go underground. They have more advanced weapons and machinery. People start to grow scared, or even in worse instances, people join in cahoot with military organization because it's more rewarding. All this is harmful and it's irreversible if not taken action immediately. Therefore, we ought to do this now, not any time else. Okay, third is vulnerability, minorities, developing countries. Very straightforward. Why this actor, absence of assistance, would presumably be trapped in the circumstance forever. or maybe they're already put into certain circumstances of disadvantage. Gender, capitalism, religious dogma, everything, all the stock analysis you can use to paint it. But here's one important remark when doing this. I've seen in a lot of novice teams making this mistake, which is telling the judge, this actor is vulnerable, the child is vulnerable, but you don't tell reason why they are vulnerable. Remember, you cannot assume just because you use the keyword or the metric, the judge will immediately understand, yeah, vulnerable, that's very true. You always must give reasoning behind why are they the most vulnerable individual. So maybe as a child, they did not consent towards the birth. Number two, they don't have maturity enough to make decisions on their own. Three, they have limited physical and monetary capacity to move around. Things like that. Okay. Intuitive things that are done very simply in order to explain to the judge why this actor is at a disadvantaged position. Okay, fourth is sustainability. Does your impact last long? Obviously, like I said earlier, limited resources, maximum output. Output can be weighed by the way of how long can you benefit from that. So obviously, judges prioritize impacts that are more sustainable. Again, don't just say it's long term. Governments, people will be happy long term. Explain why are they long term. And the last one is likelihood, like we saw earlier. Does your impact more likely manifest more frequently? Okay, let's look as an example of weighing. This house believes that feminist or movement should prioritize communities that are financially in need, but adhere to strong traditional gender roles over progressive well-off communities. So the weighing metric that is decided here is vulnerability. How do we construct the argument? Absence of assistance, the most progressive well-off communities can always sustain themselves independently. The needy community needs money to start up and structure the movement and organize grassroots program. Absence of this assistance, they will not be able to propagate the movement forward. Therefore, we ought to prioritize assistance to the most vulnerable community that needs this the most. Okay, very simple. They are vulnerable because they don't have XYZ. And I'm also putting in another one. Why is it particularly important for them to be the starting point? So, uniqueness is also another metric, but you can use it strategically where you think it's necessary. Okay, last one. What are even ifs? This is done by comparing the opponent's material at the best case scenario. This is done at the end of rebuttals or arguments to show why, assuming the opponents can achieve their impact, your claims are still better. Not all arguments may have even if, given that some impacts may always be certain and hard to dispute. Okay, even if you can do and if you can execute very well, it's pretty much you telling the opponent's argument hold no value. This is one of an example. This house believes that ASEAN should form its own collective military organization, i.e. NATO. Okay, and then government makes an argument that small countries don't have infrastructure, money to develop. Therefore, they need to be in an organization. So your Timor-Leste, Cambodia, Laos can get protection from maybe AUKUS or China's dispute in the nine dash line, all those things. Okay, sounds good, right? Sounds strong. And the Gulf team is really mechanizing quite well as well. So what would an even if here look like? Even if these teams can get more advantage by being can get more resource by being as part of ASEAN, their contributions or their benefit will only be contingent on the other team's strength and willingness. What does it mean? Because they now choose to be in ASEAN and all the military infrastructure is being controlled by the bigger countries, presumably Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and Singapore, these countries become complacent. So, on the comparative in our world, over a longer period of time, smaller countries would have been investing money on their own, developing their own military infrastructure, and they have independent autonomy over their sovereign infrastructure. But because they're now part of ASEAN and you make them dependent on bigger countries, they will never achieve their own military prowessness. Why is it true? Look at NATO. Trump is threatening to pull out funding if all members don't meet the minimum 2% contribution of the GDP. So all the countries who previously thought, I don't need to invest in military because NATO is there. If US decides to go out, GG. They got no military to defend themselves. So this is what an even if look like. Take them at their best. Assuming Gulf is right, they can get assistance now. Why over the long term when they don't have independent, they're still worse off. Okay? That is even if. And don't overcomplicate yourself sometimes and think, oh, I don't have an even if it means I'm losing. It's not like that. So as a debater, you can only make up things that come to your mind at that point in time. How do you get good argument, good material to come to your mind? It's just practice. Do more tournaments, do more practice. Over time, they become stock analysis in your own head. Okay, that is even if. Okay, any questions from anyone? I think that's pretty much end of the lecture for 1.5 hours. I'm now free to have any questions. It doesn't necessarily have to be about what we learned. It can be any other aspect of rebuttal or maybe a claim you saw that you'd like to ask me as well. Anyone? Any questions? I'll just leave the chat open for 1 minute. Can I do early weighing or is it possible after extension? Okay, weighing is a very complex mechanism you can use in debate. The first piece of weighing comes in your rebuttal. So let's assume you do rebuttals before your arguments. After you complete the 3 reasons why, you can do the weighing right away for the rebuttal. Second is your extension or your argument. You can also do it after your arguments. So there is no single rule of where you should use it. Rather, it's more about strategically using it where you think it acts as a clincher, a tipping point. The moment you do the weighing, the assumption is that the judge is definitely buying my claim or argument. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I think no other questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for paying attention. I hope whatever you all learned today helps you along the way in your career. And those going to MNIDC, good luck as well coming weekend. Imran, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rashrvin. That was a very insightful session. Um, I'm sure everyone here sincerely appreciates the massive legwork you took in bestowing upon your wisdom and making sure the session was engaging and well educative for all the workshop people here. On behalf of Council and also the MNIDC CAP, we hope everyone gained a lot from this session. And please, of course, join the next 2 sessions on judging by Shireen if you're judging, and also the argumentation session, which I will do. That is all for this session, everyone. I hope you all have had a great night. And again, Rashvin, thank you so much for dedicating your time to be here.